Good afternoon. I'm so happy to see such a nice audience for this wonderful presentation that we have today. I am Deb Heisel. I am the chair of the Events and Professional Development Committee for the Ohio Transfer Council. And behind the scenes, again, we have Jonathan Gates, who will be moderating the session, and he will show up at the end. Our two speakers today are I'm really excited about them. We have Marisa Cargill and Katy Braford of Cuyahoga Community College. They've already shared with you in the announcement of this session, the best practices guide, which is used at Tri-C. But today they are going to speak to the topic of evolution of transfer support, creating centers, removing barriers, and implementing best practices, which has something for all of us. They have presented this material at a national conference, NISTS, not too long ago, and they offered to share it with us in the Ohio Transfer Council, the Ohio transfer community. So I welcome all of you, and would you like to take it over, Katy?
Yes, thank you so much, Deb, for that great introduction. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Marisa and I are really excited to be here today to talk with you a little bit about what we have going on at our institution. So our presentation is called The Evolution of Transfer Support, but really what we're going to be focusing on is going over the creation of our best practices guide. So like Deb said, I'm Katy Braford. I work for the West Shore campus of Cuyahoga Community College, which we will be referring to as Tri-C throughout the presentation, just to shorten it up a little bit. And that's in Westlake, Ohio. And I'll let Marisa go ahead and introduce herself.
I'm Marisa Cargill. I'm a transfer specialist at Tri-C at the Western campus in Parma, Ohio. And I previously to this position had served as a counselor that we'll talk a little bit about later on in the presentation, but we're really excited to share this information with you and talk to you a little bit about what we're going to cover today. Not only do we want to make sure that you know about our best practices, but we really want to have it be a reflective practice too, so that you're able to look at your own institution and see what the transfer student support looks like and how maybe this can be applied to your own institution. We'll identify those services and practices that we really think are high importance, VIP, and also talk about the challenges and limitations. Hopefully, we'll be able to provide some information that's helpful for you, whether you're a 2-year or a 4-year institution. And we're going to welcome questions. One of the things that we noticed throughout the thing is that it's sometimes hard to manage asking questions during, but we will periodically be checking that save a lot of Q&A time for the end as well. So feel free to put questions in the chat, and if we don't get to it right away, we will come back to it at the end. All right. And sorry, Katy, there you go.
That's okay. Okay, great. Thank you. So we see that there's actually quite a few of you that have joined us, which is really exciting. We want to do a quick poll, which I will ask Jonathan to pull up for us. Just a few questions for you to answer about where you work and if you're student facing or not. Just kind of helps us get some context in terms of knowing who we're presenting to so that we can try to cater the information a little bit that we're giving. So you should have just seen a poll pop up if you want to go ahead and answer those questions and submit, and we'll give about a minute or two for everyone to answer those. And then we'll share those results once they come in. So like Marisa said, feel free to post your questions in the chat along the way. We'll definitely address those towards the end of the presentation. We'll plan to have lots of time for that, but so that you don't forget it, you can post them along the way. That's totally fine. And if it's something that we can address at the moment, we'll try to do that too. And I will mention too, in the email reminder that went out this morning, Jonathan had included a link to download our best practices guide as well. We'll be sharing some screenshots, some little snippets of the guide during the presentation. But if you wanted to take a look at the whole thing, it might give you a better idea of what we're going to be discussing. So, and we're just realizing now that our poll is forcing everyone to answer that final question. So just go ahead and answer it as if you were answering for your institution. And we'll kind of take those answers with a grain of salt. We're more curious to see who has dedicated transfer services at their institution and who doesn't. So we'll give a few more seconds here for everyone to answer. All right, Jonathan, if we've gotten a few responses in by now, you can go ahead and maybe share those results so we can take a look at who we have with us here today. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So it looks like we have a nice mixture of student-facing folks and then those of you that work kind of behind the scenes. I know that's sort of a simplified way to define the work that we do, but Marisa and I are both in student-facing roles, so we wanted to kind of see, you know, who we were presenting to in terms of what your duties are at your institution. So looks like we have quite a few four-year public schools with us. Thank you for joining. And then some of our friends from other community colleges, it looks like some private schools as well. And okay, so I know these last two questions may have been skewed just a little bit since they were required for everyone to answer. But it looks like there's a handful of schools that don't provide any transfer planning support to students. Okay, that's really good to know. And then some of you that do have dedicated student-facing transfer centers. So a little bit of a mixture there also. So we'll kind of keep our conversation general today. Again, if you have questions about something specific, please feel free to post those in the chat. So I'll go ahead and close out of those results. Thanks everyone for participating. And apologies for that required question that may have changed our results a little bit. So Marisa, if you want to go on to the next slide. All right, so we wanted to start by giving a little bit of context. I know that I think all of us here are probably from Ohio, so you may be familiar with Tri-C as well. But just to give you some context to better understand where we're coming from, our institution, we are a large multi-campus community college. We're located in Northeast Ohio, so in and around the Cleveland area. We have 4 main campuses and several offsite locations as well. And we serve over 50,000 students each year. Those are credit and non-credit students. And about 40% of our students are pursuing Associate of Arts and Associate of Science degrees, which are intended for transfer. We also have a very large number of nursing students. So we have a big population at our institution of students who are destined for the transfer process, essentially, to go on, hopefully after graduation from Tri-C to earn a bachelor's degree. So there's definitely a need for that kind of support. So the transfer center itself, a little bit of history there, we actually grew from a grant-funded program that started several years ago. It was between Tri-C and our closest state school, which is Cleveland State University. The original idea was to help facilitate transfer between those two institutions, and it was so successful that the college then decided to fully fund it after the grant ended, and they created the Transfer Connection Center, and that was in 2014. So after the success of that center, other campuses at the college outside of the metropolitan campus, where the original center was housed, decided that this is a service that all of our students need to have easier access to. So we now actually have 4 full transfer centers at each of our 4 campuses. And we are holding appointments at different locations as well. For example, our Western Campus Transfer Center also serves our Brunswick University Center as well. So, and we're really fortunate because transfer is actually included in our mission statement at Tri-C. So this is something that we have been able to really rely on as we've continued to grow our services and really focus on how we can best support our students. And you'll see our mission statement there on the screen. It's explicitly spelled out. So that's something that we're definitely really grateful for.
And that's the history and the context that we have there, but we have really grown over the years. So this is just kind of a little visual reminder of this growth. And so you can see from the beginning of time, it was a lot smaller than where we are today. When we're factoring in that it's academic years, we still have a few more weeks left. So we're already up like from last year. And if we had looked and compared like fall semester trending into spring semester and what we thought spring would look like, we probably would have even had a higher number than that 2668. Unfortunately, we all know that we're kind of dealing with unusual times, and so we're happy to say that we're still at an increase, even though it was probably not as much as we projected it would be. In our work from home experience, I guess we should say, that we've noticed a trend in the change of type of appointments. So we offer scheduled appointments. Drop-ins or walk-ins are usually for like a quick question, something that can be answered in like 5 or 10 minutes typically. What we've seen is actually an overall 16% increase between the two, but 22% decrease in appointments, but a 75% increase in those drop-ins. So what we've noticed in that, in this time period since mid-March, people are just connecting in a more quick fashion. They might be repeating those quick questions or just kind of following up with us to ask their additional questions rather than scheduling. I think a lot of that happened just because everyone was trying to adapt to COVID-19 and learning remotely and all of that. So we did notice that trend, but we are happy to say like this has been a significant level of growth. And if you look at from 2014 to 2018 even, it's over 1,000% growth. So we're really excited about that, as well as the college. And to that point, we talked about this, we have the guide. This is what we're really here to talk to you about today. And as Katy mentioned, it's aligned with the college's mission, this guide that we created because transfer and successful transfer at that is really the goal. And one of the things that really helped create this guide, but why, right, is that we at the college had developed different access teams through a mission of our strategic plan. There was a focus on removing barriers and really providing a higher level of access to all students. And as a result, these access teams were created. One of the access teams got to focus specifically on transfer students. And through that, we really tackled some issues that would be meaningful to anyone who's invested in transfer, right? So we know that a lot of faculty have students who are interested in that. We know that there are a lot of staff that get questions that before the transfer centers were maybe more challenging to answer. So we wanted to make sure that we were coming together with something that made sense and really served everyone in the college, since we are a multi-campus institution, equally well. And as such, consistency became like a big part of that conversation. So we looked at what would be a consistent service. This is going to serve as like something that will be really helpful for us. The access teams were volunteer groups. It was created, there were a couple transfer specialists and folks from our articulation, but it was mostly staff and faculty outside of those arenas that were able to develop this. And what we really found successful about this is that it really helped everyone kind of know what to expect in terms of the work we do. When I started in the transfer center, this is just like personal experience, I was kind of on my own at the Western campus because my other colleague was out on maternity leave. So it was really challenging to navigate the difference between my former role as counselor and now as transfer specialist. So this was something that really helped kind of build that. And we also recognize the living, breathing document, but it's also something that can really serve us well in succession planning or training of new staff. So we're really excited. These access teams really put in the work to figure out what would be the best services, and then basically submitted that to leadership to be able to say, is this what we want? And how does this look for the college? So we're really excited. And Katy's going to share a little bit more about how this was developed, some of the other resources.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. So yeah, like Marisa was saying, there were a lot of minds that kind of came together to help build this. And I do want to acknowledge that Marisa and I are certainly not the only transfer specialists at Tri-C. We have some really wonderful colleagues that have done a lot of work in this area as well. So we're kind of representing that whole group today, but want to give them the credit where credit is due for this as well, to use a term that we love in Ohio. So to kind of further inform our work, we did want to look at some national research and best practices as well. So we've used more than what's listed on this slide, but these are just 3 that we kind of wanted to highlight because they are really important in our field. And these have sort of helped to legitimize the need for a transfer center in a way. I know probably everyone on this call understands the importance of the support that we provide to transfer students and how necessary that is and the work that we all do. But just to help kind of explain it to maybe our colleagues or leadership that don't work as closely in the field, I think it's a great idea to highlight national research and best practices whenever possible. So the first one on here, the Transfer Playbook, this has become really one of the standard texts in our field. I think it's an excellent resource for both community colleges and four-year schools. It seems like a lot of work that's done in transfer sometimes only focuses on one side of the equation or the other. So this one gives really great recommendations for both sides, including essential practices. So that's a couple of the quotes that we have on there that we've kind of pulled from in terms of making transfer student success a priority. If you haven't read that text, I highly recommend it. If you don't have time to read the whole thing, they have some really great summary pages, which are the essential practices. So definitely check those out. They have them for both four-year schools and community colleges. The NACAT Code of Ethics, we were really paying attention to the transfer section that was added to this a few years ago. I know that it's since changed because of some new regulations that had come down, but some of the important information for transfer students specifically has remained in that code of ethics. So it gives information on what students can kind of expect during the admission process, or what they should be given or should kind of have access to. So it helps us advocate for students during the transfer admission process, both when they're coming into our institution to help make sure that we are serving our transfer in students equally, and also helping to advocate for our students as they're going through the transfer out process into another institution. The final one on here is Transfer as Academic Gauntlet. This is a personal favorite of mine by Dr. Stephen Handel, which was written in 2013, but remains very relevant today. And he really focused on sharing the student perspective and talked about kind of 3 different barriers that exist with the transfer process in terms of getting ready to transfer, getting into the transfer school, and then actually getting through the process of enrolling and graduating from that institution. So that was really helpful in kind of giving more of the student perspective to this work as well.
So essentially, we took both of those things, fused them together to develop this guide. What were the best practices? But before we could really say like what we were doing, before we could define any of that, we really thought it was important and essential to identify who we were able to help. And once we did that, we were able to really look at the what and the how in terms of like who we provided services to and in what capacities. We obviously wanted to say, we know we help like our current and enrolled students, right? But we didn't want it to stop there. So we really expanded those parameters to identify other populations within the college that or community that we serve. And really recently, like within this past academic year, we've been trying to put forth more collaboration with recruitment efforts at the college, attending prior to the pandemic, some of the events in the community that our recruiters or admissions folks would attend so that we could talk to high school students, really kind of demystify the community college experience because, you know, sometimes people have a lot of horror stories related to transfer, and just to make them understand that Tri-C basically has done a lot of work to make sure that that's not going to happen to you, and that we have these centers there to support to ensure that your transfer is as seamless and successful as we can possibly make it. And I think that helped alleviate a lot of fear within the community, within some of those students or their parents at some of those high school events. What we're also doing now is a lot of virtual stuff. So I'm sure this is not something that is just unique to Tri-C. Everyone is trying to figure out virtually how we can best support. And so in the same vein, we are actually beginning to work with our recruiters and have some virtual transfer interest events. And our first one is next week. So we're really excited about that. But you can see on this guide, and I believe that's page 1 if you actually have like the guide open itself too. But we talked about who we really can help, and it's not just students. We also talk about helping faculty and other staff, because there is sometimes this like mystery about transfer, and we really just want to make sure that people are really well informed about it. To that point, we are really working on identifying transfer receiving. So that's just some terminology that's sometimes used in the transfer world, but to talk about transfer in students. So that's usually unique to your school, because transfer in doesn't seem maybe as popular of an option, but we're finding right now it's a very popular option with uncertainty at 4 years and things like that, that we are seeing some folks ask questions and understand the transfer in. So we historically have kind of struggled, because most of the transfer in like processes at the college kind of live in different places. So yes, the transfer center can help, but are they required to talk to the registrar? Yes. Are they going to need to talk to our counseling or advisors? Yes. And so there's maybe a lot of stops for transfer in students to make. We definitely identified some things when we created this guide that we thought were best practices for those folks. We want this to further develop, and the good news is that it actually has, because of the pandemic. So that is, and we can talk about it a little more at the end too with our outcomes, but this really has grown. And so one of the things that we have often requested of transfer sending students, which Katy will talk about in a minute, was that the four-year schools rather would provide some type of unofficial evaluation to our students, and that is considered best practice from NACAC. And we weren't really able to do that for our students, at least not in a formalized way. And so this is something that actually is beginning as well with our recruitment efforts. So we're really excited about that and expanding. Again, this is a living, breathing document. And so this is something that we really look to better define on the guide once we have more experience with processing those unofficial requests and things like that.
Yeah, so this section then talks about our transfer sending students, which Marisa was just talking about transfer in. So this is kind of talking about students transferring out of Tri-C and how we help them prepare for that process. Typically, this is kind of the most common student situation I think that we have handled. But like Marisa was saying, we're seeing a lot more transfer in students now because of various things changing related to the pandemic, plans changing and whatnot, financial need, those sorts of things. So it's definitely an evolving document, as she was saying. And typically, again, these students are students who are transferring on to a four-year institution to earn a bachelor's degree, but we'll help any student that needs it. So sometimes it's maybe a student whose family is relocating and they need to go to transfer to a different community college in another state, so we can help them with that process as well. So really anyone that's transferring out of the institution. We were really intentional in this list of explaining exactly how it is that we help students. It's hard to capture anyone's work, I think, in 10 bullet points, but in general, it's a pretty comprehensive overview. And it does mention some of the systems that we use as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So you'll see a question on here that says, you're not academic advisors, then what do you do? This might be a question that you're all thinking right now. It's a question that we have gotten a lot even at our own institution. I think sometimes when a new department is introduced, it can cause some maybe fear or concern from other departments, like, will my duties be shifting? will toes be stepped on, those sorts of things. So we, again, have to be really intentional in our work because our institutional structure is such that some positions are unionized and have contracts that spell out certain duties that are assigned to that position specifically. So one example of this is in our counseling centers. Our counselors are unionized faculty members, and in their contract, it states that they're responsible for all academic advising at our institution. So we are definitely really, again, intentional. I keep using that word. We're very careful to respect those boundaries and make sure that we're not violating any contracts. So as everyone, I'm sure in this webinar knows, the transfer process it has a lot of different components. Academic advising is a huge component of that, and that happens in our counseling centers, so we work really closely with them. But in the transfer center, we kind of help with those, million and five other pieces that are associated with that process. So that's kind of where this list comes into play. We're helping students through all the steps of this process. So we see students sometimes before they even enroll at Tri-C to talk to them about what partnerships we offer, maybe help them research some different schools that might be a good fit. We can help them coordinate visits. Historically, we actually offered bus tours, which is something that unfortunately we won't be able to do this semester, but definitely hope to restart those again. We do a lot of work in helping students connect with advisors from other institutions. So many of you on this call are those advisors, and we really appreciate you either coming to campus or having virtual appointments with our students to help them understand how their credits will transfer. And then finally, towards the end of this process, we help students with the actual application and transition. So you can see, here kind of some of the different services that we are offering. So this is really meant to help explain not only how we support students, but also clarify any potential misunderstandings about the work that we're doing. And it's been hugely helpful in setting expectations for consistency at all of our campuses. Because of our structure at our institution, we all have different reporting lines. Technically, we're all the same center. So it's nice to have this document as kind of a guide to make sure that we're all providing the same levels of service. And this has become even more important in our virtual world, where we're sort of operating more as one unit right now. So campus affiliation isn't as big of a deal, I would say, especially for students who just need an answer and just need some help. So we have done a really great job collaborating as a counterparts group to make sure that we have consistent levels of service with this. So with that, I will turn it back over to Marisa to share a little bit of her unique perspective on this, since she's worked in a couple of different areas at the college.
Yeah, so what's really cool, I guess, is to see the evolution. I've been at the college for about 5 years, and when I started as a counselor, the transfer center did not exist on our campus. And so it was called transfer counseling. And I had the experience of really looking at transfer guides and even articulation agreements and helping advise the student academically based off of that information. But what was missing was a lot of the other complex layers that I think I learned once I started at the transfer center. And so one of the things that I heard and was told from a colleague in that department was just like, don't advise. Like, you have to make sure now that you're in this role, like you cannot kind of cross that line. And I know it's going to be hard because you know the answer right now. And so that was something I certainly had to learn. But coming from a counseling perspective, and my background is in like mental health counseling and counselor education. So I was really like kind of in that wheelhouse. But when I conceptualized it clinically, not that we're kind of saying we're a clinic, what we do in the transfer centers is really just a case management approach to transfer. And so I felt like there were still some parallels there to case management, and certainly the counselors are needed, and we, as Katy said, like refer them to counseling and work really closely with them regularly, but they're really focused on not necessarily the present in like today, but the present in like, what are you doing this semester? What are you doing next semester? And certainly they use a lot of the resources that we may help provide students to inform their academic advising. But our role, I guess, is the more future-oriented piece of things. And so we're able to help them plan and prepare for that in a way that is not solely on classes, but like scholarships. What do you need to know about your major at that new school? Are there GPA requirements? And honestly, it takes the load off of a counselor. As a former counselor, I didn't know a lot of the layers until working in the transfer center. And so we both have the unique roles. And I think even though 10 bullets is very short for summarizing things, is well covered in this guide. So if we talk about like how we carry this out, right? The guide is really structured in saying like, these are the things that you need to do. And here's like what we do before in terms of preparation for the appointment, what happens during for a student in this category, what happens after, and if you have a follow-up, what would that look like and why? So really kind of like a training guide, as I was saying earlier, but really gives us examples for specifically like, are they someone who knows their major and the transfer school they want to attend? Are they someone who only knows their major but isn't sure and wants to kind of figure out a best fit? So we really have those pared down so that we can make sure that we're giving the students the best service as well.
Definitely. And I think it's helpful that it's also broken down by how prepared the student is for the appointment, because, you know, they come in with different levels of knowing where they're at in the transfer process. This is what I want to do. I have no idea what I want to do. So it kind of helps give some guidance there too. And it might seem like a lot to sort of write down every little detail and every little step. And this is just a small snippet actually of that section. I think it's 2 or 3 pages in the full guide, if you want to take a look at that. But it is really helpful, and it's going to become a really great training tool, I think, for, you know, our new colleagues that might join us one day, someday in the future. We do have a separate section at the end as well for recommendations for assisting our transient and visiting students. And it was added because of the name of our center, the transfer center. Really anything even remotely related to transfer, students will find us, which we are very happy to help with and help get them in the right, pointed in the right direction. So historically, it's not an area that we necessarily work a lot with. I think I have a little bit of a closer role with the transient student population, just because of some other duties assigned at my campus, which has been helpful in learning more about them and what they need. But it's certainly becoming more of an important focus for our centers as we are seeing more and more of these students with varied situations. It's no longer so much the typical transient student of, hey, I'm going to come here for the summer and then go back. Now there's other questions about, well, what if I need to stay an extra semester? What if I need to make this decision sort of last minute? So just making sure that we're also providing service to those students as well. And one thing that we've started doing since going remote is having a presence in our live chat system. And I think we see a lot of those students in there kind of trying to find information. So that's been a big help as well.
Definitely. So we created this guide, we gave it to leadership, and everything was hunky-dory, right? Not completely. So overall, we felt like it was pretty well received, but it wasn't met without like a little bit of resistance here and there. And a lot of that came from some of the language used within the guide that were maybe concerned about it infringing on some of those boundaries that Katy mentioned earlier with some contracted positions. But we really were able to push the conversation forward with this, and as a result of that too, like have had some really good outcomes. And the good news is, like, even though there was some concern about language, we actually didn't end up having to change anything. So we were able to kind of hold our ground with that too, which not only like provides support for us as a transfer centers in our existence, but the work that we do with students, which is the most important. So Katy's going to talk a little bit about some of those outcomes.
Yeah, so, you know, big picture, we talk about building a transfer culture. That's what I think a lot of conversations around transfer are, especially at conferences and things. You know, how do we get our colleagues to understand the importance of this work? Because sometimes, depending on your institution, it can be a population, either transfer in or transfer out, that maybe doesn't get the resources that it needs or doesn't have the attention. So creating this guide has really helped so much. And it's kind of a simple concept of just writing down what you're doing and sharing it and ultimately having it approved and backed by leadership. It's really empowering. And for us, it's had some amazing outcomes already in the short time that it's existed. A couple of working groups that have come out of this that I think are a really great step in the right direction. Because we are such a large institution, it's really important that we are communicating closely with other departments. So we've created a working group with our friends in the counseling center. It's a pretty big group actually that gets together probably every couple of months now. But that's a great forum for all of us to get together and kind of talk through any issues or concerns. As we all know, communication is the key to making things happen. So instead of letting any potential questions or issues fester, it's really important that we all come together and just talk it out. And that's been a great productive team so far. And then newly, over the summer, we started another working group with our recruitment specialists. So it's kind of related to the work that Marisa was talking about with our transfer in population and talking about how we can serve them better and working through a process to be able to provide unofficial transfer credit evaluations, to be able to offer information sessions for prospective students, really anything related to the process of transfer in. So kind of working on both sides. So another sort of outcome related to this, this document isn't really meant to be student facing. It's more for faculty and staff and our own staff. So we wanted to make sure that students were also getting kind of clarification on the services that we provide and having those resources as well. So we did a pretty major overhaul to our website and expanded it with some additional subpages. And that was launched earlier this summer as well. So I think, you know, all of this is a really good example of the fact that you can affect change at any level of your institution. And even if your school maybe doesn't look like ours, maybe you're not multi-campus, maybe you're a four-year school and not a community college, really just documenting your practices can help others understand the work that you're doing and can help you garner that support that you need to. So those are just a few examples. Marisa, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else.
Yeah, so beyond the website too, we worked to really establish some more materials through our marketing department to ensure that students understand the work we do and like have it in maybe a more student-facing language, since Katy mentioned this isn't really for students to consume, not that we're mad if they do, but just that it is really more for an understanding of the transfer centers, because even though we're, you know, not brand new anymore, there is some confusion about what can be done at the transfer center, and if you don't know how or what we do, how are you going to refer a student there? And so we thought it was important to establish that, but marketing is helping us establish a better understanding, not only through the website, but from some other avenues within the materials that we may hand out, or social media campaigns and things like that. So we really have been able to, I think, improve and foster like a better understanding of transfer and building that transfer culture that is like the goal, right? So we're really excited about that. Some takeaways that I think are really important, and Katy mentioned it too, write it down. We can't stress it enough. If you write it down, it seems like, oh, okay, but then like maybe you didn't realize how much your office is doing, or maybe you didn't realize like that this is something that you could use some support from another office on. And so really kind of helps you conceptualize like where there's areas for growth, where like you feel like you're doing really great work that you want to share out with people who are invested in transfer and who will benefit from the work you do. Always keep it student focused. So it's really easy to gain support from leadership and other stakeholders when it is, you know, completely student focused. And that was, I think, why we were able to hold our ground with not really having to change any of the language in this document, because it was to support the students, like the work we do. And we kind of held on that, this is to help everyone and serve the college's mission as well. No matter what the staffing levels are, we do think that just documenting that can really define your roles and streamline processes. So that's really something that we seek to do. And if you can, eliminate barriers. I think we're all kind of in that mindset right now in terms of figuring out how do we provide access to our students in these times. It's not without its challenges, but whenever we can do that, and we think it's the best case scenario and best practice for the students to really be able to reach them and have them understand their transfer plans. So with that, I think we're going to move it back to questions. So I'm going to get out of this, and here we go. I think the chat looks pretty active. So
yeah, let's see here. Jonathan, did you want to read any questions, or should I just kind of scroll through and pick
Nope,
some?
I gotcha.
Okay.
Hey, everyone. So the first, I don't think that you got any crazy questions. The first one, Joseph Smith just wanted to know if you guys, if we could be sending out a copy of the presentation out to the masses.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I just figure since we're recording this, we're going to send it out anyway. We'll just attach it to that email. Chaka Wilson also wanted your guys' contact information, so I told her that I would include that in that email as well. Yeah, so there is a question. Have you or are you going to do a virtual visit day with any of the 4 years? If you have, how was the attendance?
Great question. We have been able to continue doing what we call external advising, which traditionally those were appointments that were held on campus for students to be able to meet with advisors from some of our 4-year partners. So we've been doing those virtually and actually having pretty good luck with them. But in terms of a full event, I think that probably won't be happening till this fall, Marisa, correct?
that's correct. So we have been working on planning that process out, but we haven't actually had any scheduled collaborations with the 4 years aside from like those external advising appointments where they receive their unofficial evaluation. So we are working on it, but it's something that hasn't actually taken place yet.
We're hoping to be able to have a virtual college fair as a part of our what we call Grad Fest, which is during National Transfer Student Week. So more to come on that. We're doing some research at the moment. If anyone has suggestions on platforms, please feel free to send them our way.
Someone asked when the date is of the virtual transfer event is next week. That is on Wednesday at noon, so it's July 22nd. And I believe emails are going out to some of the newer applicants or interested parties, but I might be able to get you a link for that if you're interested. So certainly, if Jonathan provides our contact, don't hesitate to reach out. We could promote that.
Cool, thank you. How many employees are there in each transfer center, and what are their roles?
It's a good question. Unfortunately, there have been some changes there. There's Jonathan's cat.
Yeah, oh my God, knocking over a painting.
In recent weeks. But currently, our staffing levels, each center has at least one transfer specialist, which is the job that Marisa and I do. 3 of our campuses have 2 transfer specialists. And then we also have 2 program assistants, which are funded by a grant. And those are part-time positions, and they provide support for things like scheduling and coordinating our external advising.
Cool. So we have a couple more that just came in. To what extent do you utilize students for testimonials and peer support?
That's a great question. So, you know, the best marketing is word of mouth. And so certainly when students have good experiences with us, we find that they're sharing a lot with their friends and bringing people in. And we do work with some specific groups or organizations within our campus, like Say Yes Cleveland. And there are some requirements in terms of those programs, but the students who do attend are usually often to kind of give those individual testimonials. That is something that we are working to add to our website within this next academic year. So it's definitely been discussed. Sometimes students aren't as willing to, oh, you're going to put me on a video and use it on the website. So we've been met with a little resistance there sometimes, but there are some students who are more than willing. And so it's not something actively on our website, but definitely has been active in the conversations to use.
Yeah, we also have some sort of live versions of that, I guess, too. Our Metropolitan campus has a position that they refer to as transfer coaches. And those are actually students that are helping to support other students in this process. And they provide some really great help in that transfer center. I've had student ambassadors that have worked with me at my campus as well before too. So I think that's a great way to kind of share the student voice. And we are looking at trying to find more ways to be able to collect those student voices and really learn from their experiences as we move into this coming year.
As this document, the best practice guide, was being created, we used to have this large event. Obviously, large events are frowned upon these days, where we also offered a student panel. So it was kind of like more of a one-off, but we did talk about maybe reformatting that to be something that could be like offered on YouTube or recorded, so that we could use that again continuously. But we know transfer sometimes changes, or some of our agreements or partnerships change. So it is definitely something that we see the power in, for sure.
Okay. Do you guys collaborate at all with any of the admissions staff to assist CCP students?
Yes, definitely. So there's often some targeted outreach, and what we call that is Choose Tri-C after CCP. And we attend some of those events to answer questions. Like I was saying before, it's not always CCP, but we have been going to some of those community events where there are a lot of high schoolers there. Marketing materials, specific emails that are transfer focused. I think that might also be a group that we see. They won't really be that transfer in population, but some of the CCP seniors from this past school year may be sticking around a little longer because of the pandemic. So this is something that has pretty much been a constant part of the conversation since I started in the transfer center.
And we actually have one of our colleagues at the Metropolitan campus, Kim Liddell. She works a lot with CCP students, specifically from our High Tech Academy program, which is a program for our high school students that's housed at the Metropolitan campus. So she's pretty heavily involved with that as well. But yeah, like Marisa was saying, it's a population that we definitely all work with and are always looking for different ways to help support them, since the process can look a little bit different for them as well.
Yeah, Katy and I actually recorded a video just about, I don't know, maybe a month ago. I don't know, a few weeks. I don't remember
An hour
the days
ago.
anymore. Yeah. But that they were able to use for like new CCP students. So where we talk about how transfer, they're not identified as a transfer student if they're going, they're still traditional if they're graduating from high school and then attending a 4-year, but how we can still support them in terms of planning that and helping them find resources that are going to help them understand that process a little bit better. So we're active, we're on that.
Thanks, guys. One more question did come in from Dave Sauter. He said, excellent info. He is curious if you guys have any relationships, i.e. like conversations, meetings, email exchanges with any of the consortia.
Could you expand on that a little bit, Dave? Marisa, I'm not sure if you get that one, but I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to.
And Dave, if you would like, we could just unmute you if you have some more like follow-up insight to that. So I'll ask for you to be unmuted.
Getting the VIP question asking treatment.
He is. Hi, Dave.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Hey, Dave.
I won't put you on video because I've been working in the yard, so I'll spare you that. So I was just curious, we have various consortia around the state, Greater Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio, so forth. Just wondering if there's any conversations, relationships, students ebb and flow, different places. It's almost like it's another place for just looking to see where we can best serve students. So not sure if you would have something. It's just on my mind about, the Ohio system has, obviously all the institutions, but then we have these pockets of, consortium.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have an awesome team that works in our Office of Articulation, Transfer, and Prior Learning. They have a nice long title, lots of duties to go along with it. But it's Becky Barnes, Becky Dinnan, and Michelle Kelling. They're probably on this call too. They are a part of a lot of those conversations. They handle our partnerships. They work really closely with the state. So often we will collaborate with them, and we meet with them pretty regularly too, to kind of have those sorts of conversations that might include other institutions. So they're kind of our voice among those sort of consortia, I guess. I don't know, Marisa, if you want to add anything to
Yeah,
that.
they're more the institution-facing voice for transfer, and we're the student-facing voice for transfer. And so, like Katie said, we work really closely with them. Becky served on that access team that helped create this guide, and Becky Barnes, did I say her last name? I'm sorry if I didn't. But yes, they're very involved in that side of things, and our collaboration helps. So like when we hear students asking about certain schools and we don't have something, we certainly take that voice back to them, and then they kind of share with us what they're hearing, you know, at the other institutions or at the state level, for sure.
That's a great question to ask, and it brings up an important point too, which I'm sure a lot of you face the challenge at your institution that maybe you don't have these positions already established, or maybe don't have the funding for all these different types of positions. You know, some are student facing, some aren't. But we're really hopeful that the information that we shared today will maybe give you some ideas about how you can at least start to formalize your transfer support a little bit more, regardless of if you're student facing or not.
Right. It's a definitely needed advocacy effort, like on all our parts, to ensure that transfer students are getting their needs met. And I think that this guide just helps lay some foundation for what could work at a multitude of institutions. So we're happy to share it with you guys. And if you have questions, certainly follow up with us if you don't have any more today.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat and I don't see any more. We have a few thank yous, a great job, a super. So if, you know, I'm actually going to probably ask Deb to come back and show herself and, you know, talk us out.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's not a surprise to me that Tri-C has been able to handle a 1,000% increase in transfer appointments. They are well positioned, and I think that we all gained from their presentation today, their approach, which is careful consideration of the research, discussion, collaboration, intentional targeting of transfer, but also what they said, formalize it, write it down, and that then becomes a vehicle for training and further collaboration, and certainly a starting point for continuous improvement. So thank you. I'm going to clap. I know that all of our participants would clap as well if we hadn't muted them. I also want to tell you, so thank you so much, Katy Braford and Marisa Cargill, for sharing your presentation. They were originally supposed to present at our June annual conference, and as you know, we had to move that to being just an annual meeting because of COVID. Our next presentation, our next professional development opportunity is one that I am also excited about. Dr. Paula Compton of ODHE will be joined by her Ohio Articulation and Transfer team at ODHE in presenting some scenarios for us to consider. The title of their presentation is How Would You Respond Transfer Edition? So they will be presenting issues and possible answers to issues that we all might be facing. That is, again, Friday. That will be August 7th at noon, and I look forward to seeing all of you. We had 55 people attend today, and I hope that you all feel that you benefited from investing this time in transfer, and I appreciate it, so thank you so much. Jonathan, did you have any final words?
Not necessarily, just thank you everyone for coming. This was a great first virtual, you know, presentation. So I am going to close this out. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Katy and Marisa. Bye-bye.
Bye.